Okay, programming in Python. Now, some of you who have been programming using say Java or .NET or maybe C++, you already know what object-oriented programming is all about. But again, over here, I'm not going to go with an assumption that you guys actually know that. So we'll get started right from the very basics and we'll understand how exactly do we go about implementing object-oriented programming in Python. Now, talking of programming methodologies, we know that there are two different kinds of programming methodologies. Now, what are the two different methodologies? The first one is procedural programming, something that we've been doing so far. Whatever programming we've done so far is actually procedural programming. But then again, it's difficult to classify Python either as procedural or object oriented, because I can't just go out and write pure procedural programs, or I can't write say pure object oriented programs. But then what exactly do you mean by procedural programming? See, procedural programming में क्या होता है? In my programs, I can write certain functions. जैसे हमने अभी लिखे थे अपने programs में, I can write say n number of functions, and then this program will work when these functions communicate amongst themselves, right? So that is what is your procedural programming. That is one possible approach. But the second and the more systematic and the more popular approach that we have in programming is object-oriented programming. And practical programming today is pretty much object-oriented. Everything is done in an object-oriented manner. The biggest advantage of using object-oriented programming is that this is way more systematic and the programs are scalable. You can scale the programs easily. Now, when I say you can scale the programs easily, what I mean is if you want to add new features, if you want to do something new, if you want to modify the programs, object-oriented codes would always be easier to implement that. So that is what object-oriented programming is about. Now, if you talk of languages like say C was purely a procedural programming language. Over here, we could implement only procedural programming. Then came in C++. So C++ could implement procedural as well as object-oriented. If I talk of something like Java, Java is 100% object-oriented. उसमें procedural programming possible ही नहीं है. But when you talk of Python, Python can implement both procedural as well as your object-oriented concept. So Python gives me the luxury of writing programs either in a procedural manner or either in an object-oriented manner. But then I just made a statement saying it's not possible to write a pure procedural program, or maybe it's not always possible to write a pure object-oriented program in Python. You'll understand this as we go ahead with our discussion. Now, please understand this. What is the basic idea behind object-oriented programming, or what is going to be the major difference? See, entire object-oriented programming comes down to two very important words, two very important keywords, which are classes and objects. So straight away, I'm not interested in getting started with the program. ठीक है, programs हम लिख लेंगे, program में कोई बड़ी बात नहीं है. But let's first try and understand what are classes, what are objects, what is the aim, what are we trying to achieve using classes and objects, and then we will try and understand how to implement it in the code. Concept पहले आना जरूरी है. Once you've understood that, then we'll go to the codes. One major reason apart from the scalability and apart from being more systematic, one major reason why we use object-oriented programming is the security. The security features that are available in object-oriented programming is much better, or is way better than procedural programming. That is why we use object-oriented programming. Now, today, as we go ahead, we will be talking about certain features which will be pertaining to the security of the code that we write. That is why we will use object-oriented programming, right? Now, let us try and understand the meaning of these two words, pehle, class and object. Then we'll start with a very simple program where we'll try and write a class, we'll try and create an object, and then we'll see how exactly it works. Now, okay, let's try and understand conceptually what do you mean by a class, and then we'll look at what do we mean by an object, and then we'll talk about the syntax, right? Okay, now 10 seconds. All of you please visualize a car for me. एक कार visualize करेंगे आप. Okay. All of you visualize some car, right? Right? Now, when I ask all of you to visualize a car, all of you might have ended up visualizing a different car, proper, right? ऐसा नहीं हुआ कि everybody ended up visualizing the same car. All of you ended up visualizing a different car. But understand this, why has this happened? See, this is because when I asked you to visualize a car, all of you could visualize a different car because when I use this word car, see, understand this, the word car is not a proper noun. The word car is not a proper noun. The word car means, it says anything that contains all these things is a car. The word car is a definition. Now, whatever car you visualize, ये जो image आपके सामने screen पर है, I hope आपके car में ये सारी चीजें हैं. Now, this word car is actually a definition of something. It says if there is something which contains all these things, then it's a car. So if somebody says, say Audi, somebody says Scorpio, somebody says Lamborghini, somebody says some other car, I don't care which car you're talking about, it will have all these things. So word car is actually a definition. I will say word car is actually a class. So class is nothing but the definition of something to be created. Now that is what is a car. So please understand this, program में भी जब आपको बोला जाता है कि now we are required to create a class or now we are required to create a new class, इसका मतलब ये होता है I'm required to create a definition of something. Now definition of what? See, whenever I'm writing my codes or whenever I'm writing my program is supposed to do something. When I create a class, I'm actually creating the definition of what the program is supposed to be doing. That is what is a class. So class in simplest possible terms is nothing but the definition of something. In programming, the class will define what the program is supposed to be doing. Exact proper technical definition I'll give you in some time now, but whenever you ask write a class, आपके दिमाग में ये होना चाहिए कि हमने कुछ तो काम करना है, उसका definition हमने बनाना है. ठीक है? Now ये है काम. Now 10 seconds. Now please quickly visualize, say a Hyundai Santro for me. वो visualize करेंगे जल्दी से. Okay, I guess all of you could visualize a Santro, right? Now, if you look at the car that you visualize, all of you might have visualized a car which looks something like this, right? अभी obviously color आपने अलग देखा होगा, that's okay, but basically आप सबने ये कार देखी. See, this is because when I say a Santro is pretty much a proper noun. But understand what exactly is a Santro. Please understand, a Santro is a car, right? Now please understand what is a Santro. Santro is a real life implementation of car. So Santro is an object. So please understand this. Santro is the implementation of a definition called car. So Santro is an object. So how do I define a car? Sorry, how do I define a class and an object, and what is the correlation? Now please understand this, a class is nothing but the definition of something to be created, and object is the real life implementation of that particular definition. Now when we talk of what exists in practical life or what exists in real life, अगर आप मेरे को बोलते हो कि अरे हमको कार बताओ, see, I can't show you a car because car is an idea. It's abstract. It's an idea. I can't literally show you a car. No, not possible. It's an idea. It's a concept. हाँ, but अगर आप मेरे को बोलते हो कि हमको सैंट्रो बताओ, yes, हम अगर रोड पे जाएंगे ना तो अपने को 10 सैंट्रो दिखेगी. So what exists in real life or what exists practically in your system is an object and not the class. Class is just a definition of something. So always remember, class is just a definition and object is something that exists at real time, which implements that definition. Now suppose today I want to enjoy all the features of a car. See, I cannot just think of a car. I will need to actually go to a car that practically exists. So I'll have to go to a Santro, और Santro की मदद से हम वो सारे फीचर्स एक्सेस कर सकते हैं जो कि क्लास कार में रखे गए हैं. So if at all you want to implement the definition, or if you want to implement the concept of a class, then you will need to create an object, and using that object, you will be able to do whatever you want it to do. That is why objects are defined as objects are the basic runtime entities in an object oriented system. एक ऑब्जेक्ट ओरिएंटेड सिस्टम में अगर प्रोग्राम चलते समय कोई चीज बनाई जाती है तो वो सेंट्रो है, और क्योंकि सारा काम ऑब्जेक्ट की मदद से होता है, दैट इज व्हाई इट इज कॉल्ड एज ऑब्जेक्ट ओरिएंटेड प्रोग्रामिंग. ठीक है. So class is a definition and object is the real life implementation of this definition. That is what it is. Now, even before going further, let's try and find some correlation between class and object. और हम एक और चीज समझने की कोशिश करेंगे यहाँ पर कि जब भी हम लोग क्लास और ऑब्जेक्ट के बारे में सोचते हैं तो वो उनका आपस में रिलेशन क्या है और वो कैसे चलेगा. So as of now, what I've understood is that class is nothing but the definition of something, and our object is the implementation, the real-time implementation of this class. Now, suppose, understand this, suppose I have this definition of a class, which I've just now called as cars. Now, this is the definition. So this definition tells me कि देखो ये वाला कार है, कार में ये होना चाहिए, ये होना चाहिए, ये होना चाहिए, ये होना चाहिए. See, always treat class as a recipe. मतलब इफ आई टेक अ रेसिपी ऑफ समथिंग, वो रेसिपी पढ़ के मेरे को परफेक्टली समझ में आ जाता है कि भाई क्या खाना, जो भी चीज की वो रेसिपी है या जो भी चीज हम बनाना चाहते हैं वो क्या है. आई परफेक्टली अंडरस्टैंड कि ओके कोई भी चीज बनाना है जिसकी रेसिपी हमारे पास है, उसमें क्या क्या इंग्रेडिएंट्स है, क्या है, क्या प्रोसीजर है उसको बनाने का, उसकी क्वांटिटी क्या है, एंड एवरीथिंग वो मेरे को समझ गया. बट ऑलवेज अंडरस्टैंड वो रेसिपी हम नहीं खा सकते हैं. रेसिपी ठीक है, आइडिया है, वो खा नहीं सकते हैं, अपने को वो रेसिपी बनाना पड़ेगा. we'll have to implement that idea, and whatever you create, that is what you can obviously eat. So always treat class as a recipe. So car is just a recipe. Now if I want to enjoy all the features of a car, I will have to create an object, say Santro or whichever car that you want to, and using that particular feature or using this particular Santro, I can access all the features of this class called car. So car is a class and Santro is an object. Now, please understand this. आप जब यहां पर देखते हो क्लास, आपके कार में क्या क्या फीचर्स होंगे वो सब डिफाइन करता है कार, और उन फीचर्स को एक्चुअली इंप्लीमेंट करता है Santro. ऐसे ही हमारे प्रोग्राम में हमारा प्रोग्राम क्या करेगा, वो सब डिफाइन करेगा क्लास. अ क्लास डिफाइंस व्हाट द प्रोग्राम इज केपेबल ऑफ डूइंग. लेकिन अगर मैंने सिर्फ क्लास बना के छोड़ दिया प्रोग्राम में तो ये किसी काम का नहीं है. दिस इज लाइक आई हैव जस्ट क्रिएटेड अ क्लास एंड देन दिस इज लाइक आई जस्ट हैव द डेफिनेशन कॉल्ड कार एंड दैट्स इट. हाँ, but I'll not be able to drive just because I know the definition. Similarly, आपने प्रोग्राम में खाली क्लास बना के छोड़ दिया तो उससे कुछ भी होने वाला नहीं है. So what I now need to create is I need to create an object of this particular class, and using this object I'll do whatever I'm required to do. ठीक है. तो प्रोग्राम में what my program is capable of doing, I'll understand by looking at a class, and is my program actually doing it, that I'll understand looking at an object. You can also remember, or you can understand it like this. आपका प्रोग्राम क्या करेगा, क्या कर सकता है, वो डिफाइन करता है क्लास, और आपका प्रोग्राम एक्चुअली क्या करता है वो डिपेंड करता है what have you done with an object. So that is what is the relation between class and object. काम करवाने वाला class, काम करने वाला object. Also, remember this, when I say Santro is a car, I say so because Santro contains everything that the definition of class car provides. Santro contains everything that the definition of class car provides. An object, will always contain everything that the definition of whatever the definition of its class provide. हर ऑब्जेक्ट में हर वो चीज होती है जो उसके क्लास के डेफिनेशन में रखी गई है. See, Santro will have everything that the definition of class car provides. Santro cannot do anything beyond the definition of a car. Similarly, कोई भी object, it cannot do anything beyond what the definition of the class that to which it belongs, whatever that class provides, your object cannot do anything beyond that. Needless to say, for me to be able to create an object, the class has to exist. अरे अगर कार का डेफिनेशन ही एग्जिस्ट नहीं करेगा तो सैंट्रो कैसे बनेगा? बिना क्लास के ऑब्जेक्ट बन ही नहीं सकता है. And in other words also, आप ये भी समझिए, if I'm telling you program में कि चलो अभी एक object बनाते हैं, what this means is I already have the definition called class, because if the class is not existing, there is no chance that I will be able to create an object. Okay, so this is what is going to be object-oriented programming. Now, see, talking of object-oriented programming, now object-oriented programming is very simple. Now, when we go to the programs, the initial programs, you'll find them very simple, छोटे से programs है, and then we can make the programs complicated. Programs can be as complicated as possible, but understand the whole programming using object-oriented programs happens in 3 steps. 3 ही चीज होती है, फिर चाहे आपका कोड 10 लाइन का हो या 10,000 लाइन का हो. What do I do when I'm doing object-oriented programming? All I'll do is, my step 1, I'll first create a class. My step 2, I'll create an object. My step 3, using this object, I'll access all the features of a class. हो गया object-oriented programming. Object-oriented programming में कौन से 3 steps हैं? Step 1, create a class. Step 2, create an object. And step 3, using this object, access all the features of a class. That's it. इतना ही होने वाला है. हाँ, कैसे होगा कोड में? We are still to see, but this is what is the concept. So what are the 3 steps? One last time: create a class, create an object, and using that object, you access all the features of a class. Now that is what object-oriented programming is going to be all about. Is this understood, please? Right. Now, going to the technical definitions. Now, what exactly is an object? Object को हमने कैसे define किया? Objects are the basic runtime entities in an object-oriented system. एक ऑब्जेक्ट-ओरिएंटेड सिस्टम में अगर रन टाइम पे कोई चीज एग्जिस्ट करके सारा काम करती है तो वो ऑब्जेक्ट है. What's a class? A class precisely is a collection of data and functions. इसके अंदर data होता है और इसके अंदर functions होता है. This is one definition of a class. What's a class? A class is a collection of data and functions. Class की एक और definition ये होती है, a class is a collection of objects of the same type. A class is a collection of objects of the same type. Now suppose if I have this class called car, मैं इसके कितने भी object बनाऊं, they would be similar to this only Santro, right? So they are a collection of similar type of objects. अच्छा, एक और चीज आप ऑब्जेक्ट के बारे में समझिए. मैं एक Santro बना सकता हूं, मैं 2 Santro बना सकता हूं, मैं 10 Santro बना सकता हूं. See, all the Santros would be cars. All the Santros will have everything that the class definition of class car provides. I can create n number of objects for the same class, and these objects would all be similar, but they would all be independent of each other. अभी अगर रोड पे 2 Santro चलती है, they are independent of each other. They are pretty much identical, but they are independent of each other. They are both objects of the same class, but they are इंडिपेंडेंट ऑफ ईच अदर. तो आप ये चीज याद रखिए, आप आपके प्रोग्राम में कितनी भी क्लास बना सकते हैं, और सॉरी, आप एक क्लास बनाकर कितनी भी ऑब्जेक्ट्स बना सकते हैं. ऑब्जेक्ट्स वुड बी सिमिलर, दे विल हैव सिमिलर फीचर्स, बट दे विल आल्सो बी इंडिपेंडेंट ऑफ ईच अदर. Okay, what we'll now do is we'll start with a very, very, very simple program जिसमें हम लोग ये देखेंगे कि क्लास कैसे बनाना है, right? Now these are the definitions that I was talking about. A class is a collection of data and functions. और object क्या है? It is a basic runtime entity in an object-oriented system. Okay, let us just try and understand how to create a class and how to create an object. Now, please observe this. What have I done over here? I'll create a class like this. Kaise? Please look at this. I'll create, the keyword that I use is class. आप कुछ भी नाम दे सकते थे. Suppose the name that I've given is data और उसके आगे ये colon डाल दिया. This is how you'll start by creating a class. Now over here, I've used two variables in this program or in this class, say A and B, and I have initialized them to 10 and 20. So these are the two values. Apart from that, I'm also adding a function to this particular class. I've written a function. So we all know that functions start by this word called def, and the name of the function is display. As of now, please don't bother about this word self. Once I finish my discussion, I'll then discuss this concept of self as well. So this display function, what is this display function going to be? This display function, whenever invoked, will display the value of A and B. So this is what is a class that I have created. It has two variables A and B, and it has a method. Now I should use the word method called display. Now, what do you mean by or what is precisely the difference between a function and a method? See, syntactically, they are exactly the same, but understand this, when I say a function, now whatever functions we were writing in our previous programs, you might have seen that we might have written a function called, say, define, add, and then whatever the code, right? But understand, look at this display method. This method is a member of this particular class called data. So whenever I'm talking of a member method, or whenever I say I'm talking of a member function, this function display belongs to class data. In that case, display becomes a method. So conceptually they are different. Syntactically, syntax जो है ये जो लिखने का तरीका है वो एकदम सेम होता है function का और method का. So when I say that this is a method, by default what it means is it belongs to some particular class. But suppose if I type just this much and if I leave it like this, right? No, this is not working. This is nothing's going to happen if I write just this much of the code, because हमने class बनाया. What did I tell you? कि खाली class बना के कुछ नहीं होता है. Because now looking at this program, और सिर्फ ये class का definition में देख के आपको ये बोल सकता हो कि ये program क्या करेगा. आप मेरे से पूछेंगे कि अरे what will this program do? I'll say this program has two variables A and B, and whenever executed, it will display the value of A and B. But if you ask me कि A और B display हो रहा है क्या? No. It's like I have a recipe, but I haven't implemented that recipe. तो वो recipe तो हम खा नहीं सकते हैं ना. This is as simple as this. हमारे पास कार का definition है, लेकिन बाबा सैंट्रो बना ही नहीं है, तो हम लोग कैसे इसको खा सकते हैं? Now observe this. ये कैसे होगा? Please ध्यान से देखिए. What did I tell you? For object-oriented programs to run, what are the three steps? Step 1 is create a class. Step 2 is create an object. And step 3 is using that object, you can access everything that belongs to the class. I've done just step 1. I've created a class. But for this to work, now I'll create an object. So how do I create an object? Object obviously class के बाहर बनेगा. So this is where I've created this object. Please look at this code. Now over here, I'm creating, when I write D is equal to data. So what is this D? D is an object of the class data. Now, if I want to access the data, whether it is the variables or whether it is the methods, I can do it this way, right? Now, observe this. When I write print D dot A, see, understand this. Look at it like this. This is my class data. इसके अंदर दो वेरिएबल्स हमने बनाए हैं. A has been initialized to 10 and B is initialized to 20, and I have a method now called display like this. Okay, और display के अंदर I've displayed the values of A and B. Now यहाँ पर outside this class I've created this object called D. Now D dot करके I will be able to access whatever the data that I want. So now when I want to access anything belonging to this class using D, I'll write D dot A, I'll write D dot B, D dot whatever. And this is how my object-oriented programming will work. What were the three steps? The three steps were create a class. Step 1. Step 2 is create an object. And step 3 is using this object, you can access all the data belonging to this particular class. एक और चीज observe. See, suppose, okay, I'll try and demonstrate this. I'll just take this. Now just observe this. I'll just zoom this. I've created this class called data, which has these variables like this. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an object. So when I write D is data, this is creating an object for this class. Right. Now, please look at indentations. This object is independent of this particular class. Now, when I write, say, print, say, D dot. If you see, it will prompt me. If you see, Spider is prompting me with all the members. So D is an object of class data. So D has access to all the members of this particular class. Now, this is something which you might have experienced while typing programs earlier as well, because whenever you type something dot, and if you can see this list, what it clearly means is that you are working with an object of some class and I have access to these members. अच्छा, अभी अगर आप देखेंगे ना, D के लिए all you can say see is A, B and display. That's it. So एक ऑब्जेक्ट जो है वो सिर्फ अपने क्लास के सारे डेटा को एक्सेस कर सकता है. Suppose in this program if I had some other class as well, D will not be able to access it. See, if Santro is a car, Santro will be able to access only the features of this class called car. So I can just select it over here. Similarly, I can write print D dot. I'm not required to remember. Spider will tell me what are the members that I can access. And then I can also write print D dot. Sorry, not like this. It will be a D dot display is a method. So I just call it like this, and hopefully the program should work fine now. Now when I run this program, observe what happens when I run this program. See, this is my output. जो 10 or 20 पहले आया, this is because of the first two print statements, and this A is equal to 10 and B is equal to 20 I'm getting because I'm invoking this display method. That is how it is going to work. So this is how we will work using object-oriented programming. A class के अंदर you can have any number of variables, you can have any number of methods. If at all say there was some other method also, see I can have any number of methods over here, right? Suppose I'll just copy this quickly. No, indentation is improper. अभी ये ठीक है. Suppose I write another function, say display one. We could have named it as anything, right? And say what I do is say print I'm writing sum is equal to self dot a plus suppose ऐसा कुछ एक और एक मेथड यहां पर लिख दिया. I'll just erase this out. So you can have any number of methods. It's okay. एक क्लास के अंदर कितने भी मेथड हो सकते हैं. Then if I write d dot, see it is showing display one as well. Now when I call this method, it should give me the desired result also. See, पहले A is equal to 10, B is equal to 20 आ गया, and then you get this. Also, when you're writing multiple methods आप किसी भी sequence में लिख सकते हैं, कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता. Whether I write display first or whether I write display one first, it doesn't make a difference. When will a method get executed? See, functions के लिए ये फंडा कभी नहीं बदलता. A function or a method will get executed depending on when they are invoked or when they are called. तो ये जब मैंने लिखा d dot display तो execute होगा. अब suppose मैंने भले display function लिखा है, but I'll just remove this statement, right? Now when I execute this, you will see that even though the display function has been written, it does not get executed over here. So that is why I said कि खाली class लिखने से कुछ नहीं होता. It is the object that will determine कि what's happening or what's not happening in the program. Class के अंदर function है, लेकिन अगर आपने उसको call नहीं किया, उसको invoke नहीं किया है, तो it is not going to work. So this is how we will write object-oriented programs. ठीक है? Now, in 5 minutes, what you'll do is you'll just type this program starts working fine. That is when I'll talk about this concept of self. One last time, object oriented programming में क्या करेंगे? Step 1, create a class. Step 2, create an object. Step 3, object की मदद से access all the methods, all the members belonging to the class. There are a lot of more concepts which we need to add to this, but please get this program going, and then I'll continue with the concept of self and then the more variations that we have with a class. Please type this quickly, get the outputs, please. So I'm going to another program which is similar to this, which will have slightly more methods, and then we'll talk about the importance of this word self. Iska importance kya hai? Observe. Now when I go ahead with this program, suppose एक program हम लोग अभी ये लिखते हैं, write an object-oriented program in Python for calculating the sum of any two given integers. तो अपन ने एक program लिखना है जिसमें I'm required to add two integers. ऐसा मैंने program लिखना है, ठीक है? Now over here, always make it a habit that wherever possible, preferably one, you write object-oriented programs, and second, for each logical task that you perform in the program, try and write a separate method. जैसे यहाँ पर for calculating the sum of two integers, I'm just trying to identify what are the logical tasks that I'm required to perform. Task number 1 would be, I would want to read the values first. Task number 2 would be add them, and task number 3 would be to display the result. So for 3 different things, what I'll try and do is I will try and create 3 independent methods. That is what we need to do. So an extension of the previous program, ये कैसे आएगा? Observe. यहाँ पर मैंने क्लास बनाई है calculate sum, ना कुछ भी रखा। I've defined a read function, right? A read method which will read the value of A and which will read the value of B. I've defined a compute method which will add A and B. I've defined the display method which will display the answer. ये बन गया आपका क्लास, लेकिन वापस से खाली इतना लिख के कुछ होता नहीं है, right? Now C is equal to calculate sum. So C is an object of class calculate sum. C dot read, it will invoke this method and it will read the data. C dot compute, it will invoke this method and it will add the values. C dot display, it will invoke this method and it will display the result. ठीक है, स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड प्रोग्राम. एक क्लास है, उसके अंदर 3 मेथड्स हैं, वो क्लास का ऑब्जेक्ट बनाया और ये मेथड्स को कॉल किया. नाउ आई वांट यू गाइस टू फोकस ऑन दिस वन स्टेटमेंट. सी, अपने को ऐसा लगता है ये एक सिंपल सीधा स्टेटमेंट है, लेकिन इट एक्चुअली डज लॉट ऑफ थिंग्स, राइट? C is equal to calculate sum. Now what is this statement? This statement, I say, is creating an object of class calculate sum. Now if somebody is asking me what does this C look like, right? Not ideally, but to an extent I can say C looks like this. If you remember when we started, I made a statement saying एक object में हर वो चीज होती है जो class के definition में रखी गई है. So now this class का definition say has 2 variables A and B. तो इसके अंदर A और B आएगा. So whenever you read values for A say 5 तो इधर गया. Whenever you read values for B 7 तो इधर आ गया. And then whenever you add and store the result वो भी इसमें आएगा. तो एक ऑब्जेक्ट में हर वो चीज होती है जो क्लास के डेफिनेशन में रखी गई है. सो सी करके एक ऑब्जेक्ट बन गया. इसके अंदर एक वेरिएबल होगा A, एक वेरिएबल होगा B, एक वेरिएबल होगा आंसर, क्योंकि ये क्लास में है. एक जो भी वैल्यू आपने A को दिया वो इधर जाएगा, जो भी वैल्यू आपने B को दिया वो इधर जाएगा. दोनों का सम जो है वो इधर आएगा. कुछ इस तरीके से होने वाला है, राइट? Now what I'll do is I'll now move to my spider screen. I'll run this program. देखते हैं क्या होता है, and then we'll elaborate on this word called self. Now please जरा इसको अच्छे से देखिएगा. Now this is the program that we have been talking about. Now observe this. Let me try and run this program. ये मैंने program run कर दिया. Enter first value. Say 5. Enter second value. तो पहले मैंने read function call किया तो ये ऐसे आ गया. Now understand, I'm getting the sum. Now observe what has happened. When I write c.read, उसने क्या किया मालूम है? ये read method को call किया, and because this read method was invoked, it read the values of A and B for me. When I write c.compute, what it did was it invoked this compute method which added A and B and stored the answer in this variable called answer for me. When I wrote c.display, उसमें I have invoked this display method and then it has displayed the result for me. इसलिए मेरा output बराबर से आ गया. I hope this is clear how this program runs, or why is this program generating the desired output. What exactly is happening behind the scenes. I hope that is understood fine.
I have a question.
Just a sec. So I hope at least यहाँ तक समझ में आ रहा है, right? So ये तो समझ में आ गया कि ये प्रोग्राम चल कैसे रहा है, but why this word self? इसका importance क्या है? All those who've studied Java, you might have heard of something called as a this pointer. This is something similar to that. All those who haven't heard of this, don't bother. We will be discussing it properly over here. See, let's take a very simple example. Might look a bit stupid, but ठीक है. अगर suppose, see, suppose there is a class called human being, which defines what a human being looks like, or what a human being is all about, all the attributes of humans. Now, we all are objects of this particular class human being. Now, if I say I'm a human being, this is because I have everything that the class human being provides. I hope so, at least. So over here you can say this is me. I'm an object of class human being. This is you. You are also an object of class human being. This is some third person. This fellow is also an object of class human being. This fellow is also an object of class human being. Every person, every individual that we have is an object of class human beings. So over here also in this lecture, you can say we are all human beings. We are all interacting over here. Now suppose, say there are 15 members in this discussion as of now. Suppose there are 15 people. But while talking, if I use the word me, it will refer to just me and not anyone else. So suppose this is me, right? And while talking, I'm using the word me. Now, if while talking, if I use this word me, it can refer only to me. It cannot refer to anyone else now. Now, suppose there are 15 people in this discussion now. While talking, if anybody uses this word me, it will refer to that person only. It cannot refer to anyone else. So even in a room where there are 100 people sitting together, there are 100 objects of class human being. जो भी बात करते समय word me use करेगा, everyone knows that that person is referring to himself or herself. That person, that word me cannot refer to anyone else. बराबर है? So what's the correlation? Understand. See this. I go back to this program. In this program, what I had done was I had created this object C as an object for class calculate sum. Now what I do is, observe, I create another object P. P is equal to calculate sum. So I now have two objects of the class, right? Now what I do is I'm writing C dot read. उसके बाद say I'm writing P dot read. See, whatever I can do with C, I can do with P as well. Then I write P dot किधर गया? P dot compute, right? Okay, and then I'll write C dot display followed by P dot display. अब I have two objects. ठीक है? Now this is what I've done. Same hai, it's just that I'm repeating the same thing for two objects. Now let me see what my output will look like. Now when I run this program, enter first value. So this is 3 and 4. See, understand which statement is getting executed? C dot read. तो C के लिए A और B read हो गया. फिर बोलता है enter first value. This is because P dot read लिखा हुआ है, तो अब P के लिए values read करेगा. Say I've given values 7 and 9. So A और B के C के लिए I've given values 3 and 4, और P के लिए I've given values 7 and 9. Now when I run this program, see, observe this, बराबर C के लिए the sum is 7 और P के लिए the sum is 16. अब ये कैसे हुआ, ये क्यों हुआ, आप ये समझने की कोशिश कीजिए. what exactly am I trying to do over here. Now just look at this, please. Hopefully this should clear the doubts, properly. Now I have this particular class called calculate sum. हमने अभी अभी एक क्लास बनाई है which is called as calculate sum. ऐसा एक क्लास बनाए. Now this class has three variables a, b and answer. ठीक है. Now for this particular class, I first created an object called C. Now please understand this. When I create this object C for class calculate sum, C being an object of class calculate sum, C will include everything that the class calculate sum provides. तो कोई अगर मेरे से पूछता है कि C is an object of class calculate sum, तो C के अंदर क्या होगा? So this C will have provision for variable A, will have provision for variable B, and will have a provision for variable answer. लेकिन अब मैंने यहां पर दूसरा भी एक ऑब्जेक्ट बनाया है, say D. Now D also being object of the same class, so D will also have a provision for same thing. See, if all of us are human beings, all of us have everything that the class human being provides. Similarly, every object of class calculate sum will have everything that the definition of class calculate sum provides, right? तो class calculate sum के हर object में हर वो चीज होगी जो class calculate sum में provide की गई हो. Now observe this. What I've been doing is when I call this function, I've written a function called read. ठीक है, इसमें एक read नाम का फंक्शन है. फिर मैंने क्या किया, c डॉट रीड करके कॉल किया. अपन कैसे कॉल कर रहे हैं, c डॉट रीड, और रीड फंक्शन में हमने a और b यूज किया है. तो जब मैंने c डॉट रीड कॉल किया, अंडरस्टैंड रीड फंक्शन इज कॉमन. बाद में मैं जब d डॉट रीड कॉल करूंगा तब भी यही रीड कॉल होने वाला है. अब आप समझिए, ये रीड फंक्शन के कोड के अंदर a और b है. अब रीड फंक्शन को कैसे पता चलेगा कि वो ये वाला a और b है, ये वाला a और b है, उसको कैसे पता चलेगा? बिकॉज देयर आर मल्टीपल इंस्टेंसेस ऑफ a एंड b इन माई प्रोग्राम. C में भी a और b है, D में भी a और b है. C भी सेम रीड फंक्शन को कॉल कर रहा है, D भी सेम रीड फंक्शन को कॉल कर रहा है. सो व्हेन रीड फंक्शन इज एक्सेसिंग A, B और व्हाटएवर द वेरिएबल, उसको कैसे पता चलेगा कि ये कौन सा वाला A और B है? तो एक्चुअली होता क्या है मालूम है, व्हेन यू राइट C डॉट रीड, देयर इज एन आइडेंटिफिकेशन फॉर दिस ऑब्जेक्ट C व्हिच इज पास टू दिस रीड. ठीक है, तो C का एक आईडी होता है जो रीड को पास किया जाता है. सो व्हेन आई राइट C डॉट रीड, वॉट एवर आई डू विद दिस रीड फंक्शन बाय डिफॉल्ट विल बी एप्लीकेबल टू C ओनली. इसलिए जब वो वेरिएबल्स A और B यूज करता है, वो बाय डिफॉल्ट C के ही वेरिएबल्स होते हैं. सिमिलरली जब मैं d डॉट रीड लिखता हूं तो d का जो आईडी है वो रीड फंक्शन को पास किया जाता है. देन माय रीड फंक्शन वॉट एवर इट डज, बाय डिफॉल्ट इट विल बिलोंग टू दिस पर्टिकुलर ऑब्जेक्ट d ओनली. So please understand, when I write C dot read, by default read function जो करेगा C के लिए ही करेगा. When I write D dot read or P dot read, whatever, D dot read लिखा, तो whatever this read function will do only for this object D. Now how does it identify? This is because किसी भी ऑब्जेक्ट से जब हम मेथड को कॉल करते हैं तो उस मेथड को वो ऑब्जेक्ट का एक आइडेंटिटी पास किया जाता है, which then gets stored in this variable called self. तो हमारी भाषा में हम लोग बात करते समय when I use the word me and it refers to just me, similarly this word self will refer to the object for which the method has been invoked. तो भले मेरे प्रोग्राम में मैंने 10 ऑब्जेक्ट बनाए होंगे, the word self will refer only to the object for which the method has been invoked. So whether I write C dot read, D dot read or P dot read, though it is the same read function that I'm calling, my system does not get confused because depending on what object I called it for, uska ID uske paas chala jata hai. Now observe this, what happens over here. Please getting back to C dot read, I'm calling this read method. Observe. I'm calling this read method. ठीक है, जिसके अंदर मैंने A और B यूज किया है. Now, when I write p dot read, the second statement over here, I'm still calling the same method. I'm still calling this read method. Nothing has changed. Now, how did it understand कि भाई पहली बारी में वो C में जो A और B था उसको एक्सेस करना है और दूसरी बारी में वो P में जो A और B है उसको एक्सेस करना है? This is because of this word self. ठीक है? So this word self actually is nothing but the ID of the object. See, I'm using a very layman's term for you to be able to understand. Just understand this. ये self में जिस object के लिए भी I've invoked this method, वो उसका ID उसमें चला जाता है. That is how my methods and class is able to differentiate between the objects for which the code is getting executed. Now, this was always there in other programming languages, but you were not required to make it very obvious in Java, in .NET, in whatever the language. There was a pointer called this, which was, uska naam hi tha this, THIS, which was serving the same purpose. Simplest terms में अगर आपको समझना है अपनी language में whatever is the role of the word me, the same is the role of this word self in Python codes, right? Now, if I'm not writing this, I'm going to try and execute this program without this word, say self, right? Let me try and run this. See, immediately it is going to give me an error. See, look at this error. Takes 0 positional arguments, but one was given. It says that this method is not accepting any arguments. लेकिन आपने एक argument दिया है, आपने एक value pass की है. क्या हुआ मालूम है? When I wrote c.read, by default c का जो identity है वो read को pass किया गया है. But over here, because I've not written self, read is not accepting that ID. So my system is not accepting any value, and straight away my program has started giving me an error because now it is not in a position to identify the object. That is why we will have to write this particular word self. So self has to be there as an argument. Right now, एक और चीज इसमें ना whenever you are calling a method, by default self gets passed while invoking the method. That is for sure, right? That is how this program is going to work. I hope the idea of this word self is understood. Now, what you'll do for me is you'll try and write this program, a program to calculate the area of a circle and area of a square. It has to be a menu driven program. Menu driven program matlab you have to give me a menu saying 1 is for area of a circle, 2 is for area of a square, and then depending on what I select, accordingly the program has to execute, right? 10 minutes, get this program, and then we continue. Okay. So here is the solution to this program. Write a program to calculate the area of a circle and area of a square. Write a menu-driven program. Obviously, I'm going to write an object-oriented program over here. Now just observe this. When you say menu-driven, so it has to be depending on what the user wants. Accordingly, the code has to get executed. Now over here, what I've done is I've created this class called compute. Usme, I'm creating this definition. I'm creating this method called circle. I hope now this is obvious why this word self has been used. Now, when invoke, what this method will do is it will ask you for the radius like this, and then pi r square is what it will calculate, and it will return the answer for me. Similarly, I've defined another method called square. When invoke, this will ask you for the length of the side. It will calculate side square, and then it will return the answer again. So I have a class which has two different methods called circle and square. Now C over here is an object of class compute. ये हमने बना लिया. अब इसके बाद आपके सामने एक मेन्यू आता है. One is for area of a circle and 2 is for square. I'll read your option, whatever you give me, 1 or 2 in this variable called option. If the value of this variable option is 1, I need to calculate the area of a circle. If the value of this variable option is 2, I need to calculate the area of a square. So what do I do? Straightforward. If option is equal to 1, what I do is, observe, I'll call this circle method. हम लोग यहाँ पर क्या कर रहे हैं मालूम है? When the option is 1, I'm calling this circle method c.circle. Whatever result it will return, it will then get stored in this variable x, which I then display. If the value of this variable option say was 2, what do we do is We call this square method, and whatever answer it then returns gets stored in this variable y, which I'll display. If by chance the user gives me any value apart from 1 or 2, this printf statement, the last print statement, invalid option will then get executed. So you can have a class which can have different methods which are performing different tasks, and then depending on what do you want to do, you can invoke the respective method. This is how you can write this program. एक class में कितने भी methods हो सकते हैं, they will get executed depending on when you invoke them. ठीक है? All those who haven't completed this, complete this quickly in 2 minutes, and then we continue to another concept. Okay, let's move on to the next concept. I hope you guys have got this one. Now just concentrate. Now back to this particular program. Observe this, please. Now just look at this. In this program, what I've done is I've created this class called data. Then I have two variables a and b, which have been initialized to say 12 and 8. And then I have a display method, which is then displaying a and, which is displaying a. Then I've created an object called e, which is an object of class data. And then I'm writing e.a and e.c. Now what happens is this program works fine. I get my answer as 12 and 8. So for e.a, I'm getting my answer 12. For e.c, I'm getting my answer 8. Now observe what's happening here. Please look at this. The program that we just saw, usme I have a class. This class has a variable a. I think the value was 8. I've forgotten. The value of b, let me just check. A was 12 and c was 8. Okay. Okay. So we have a class where a was 8 and b was 12. And say I had a display method, whatever the values. ठीक है? हम लोगों ने क्या किया, बाहर से एक ऑब्जेक्ट बनाया से e. And now when I write print e.a or when I write print e.b or whatever the variables that I have, and when I write e.display, I can access everything. I can access everything. So over here, what's happening is I've declared, I've defined a lot of things inside this particular class, which variables hai, kuch methods hai. And once I create that object, using that object, I'm able to access everything that I want. But practically, this is something which should not be done. One very, very, very important feature of object-oriented programming is data abstraction. डेटा एब्स्ट्रैक्शन का मतलब क्या होता है? डेटा एब्स्ट्रैक्शन का मतलब होता है that I should be able to hide the data partially. Now over here, if at all I create a class like this, and the moment I create an object, if everything becomes accessible to me, if everything is public, then if somebody wants to play some mischief, it becomes very easy. What if I want that a particular variable, say a, if you're accessing a, it should be accessible. If you're accessing b, this variable b, I want this to be hidden. So what I want is when you write e.b, you should not be able to see this value. So over here, what I want is I want the control wherein I should be able to hide whatever the data I want to. ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए कि ऑब्जेक्ट बना दिया तो क्लास का पूरा डेटा मिल गया. So how do I implement data abstraction in object-oriented programming in Python? Now, those who studied other languages, if you remember, we had visibility labels like private and protected and something like that. But over here, I don't have that provision. So over here, if I want to hide any particular value from being accessible from outside, or I don't want a value to be visible from outside, then how do I do this? Now just observe this. Now when I go back to this, now suppose what I want is when I display this A should be accessible from outside. This should work. And I don't want the same to work for C. So now the question is, how do I hide this variable C from outside? So uske liye what I'll do is, all I'll do is, I'll write like this. I have put double underscores to C. Now observe when I run this program, if you see this statement is generating an error. Read the last line, print e.c. Data object has no attribute C. तो जब मैं बाहर से e.c लिखता हूं, मेरे सिस्टम को C दिखेगा ही नहीं, बाहर से वो एक्सेस नहीं हो सकता है. I can hide it like this. But now the argument is कि चलो if you want a variable to be visible, जैसे a है यहाँ पर, तो वो बाहर से access हो गया. If you don't want a variable C to be visible, तो वो यहाँ से access हो गया. यहाँ से हम उसको hide कर सकते हैं by putting double underscores. I can do that. But now the question is then why on earth do I create a variable like this, variable like C, अगर वो बाहर से access नहीं हो सकता है तो? Now understand, ऐसा नहीं है कि I cannot work with C, और ऐसा नहीं है कि C is not accessible, but then you cannot access it directly like this. The way I've tried doing that over here, I'll not be able to do this. But suppose what I do here is, observe, ध्यान से देखेंगे. Now when I write this, what I do is, I write self.c, and now I'm going to call this method e.display. Okay, this is what I've done. Let me see what happens over here. So over here, I've tried to treat C like the other variable A, and I'm going to invoke this display method now. Now when I invoke this display method, see again it is telling me that there's an error. What it says is that it does not, the data object has no attribute C. Yani I'm trying to access this display, but I'm still not able to see this variable called C. So what I'll do is, I'm just modifying my display method. I'll just put it like this, right? Now, let me try and execute this. See, now I should be able to access this. Sorry, because I've written A, it is coming out as A. I'll just change it to say C. Now when I run this, see, I'm able to access this particular data. So observe what exactly is happening out here. देखिए. See, यहाँ कैसा है? You have a class which has this variable A as 12 and which has this variable C as 8, and I have a display method which can display A and which can also display C for me. Earlier what was happening is, when I was creating this object E was able to access everything that I have over here. तो वो क्या करता था, यहां से it was able to access C, यहां से it was also able to access say A directly. By putting these double underscores here, I've hidden C. So I'm not able to access it directly from outside. This is not happening now. This is not done. So now if I want to access C, what I need to do is, as an object, I need to call a method which obviously belongs to the same class, and via this method I can now access this. So I cannot access the data directly. So any data which I've written with double underscore, which I say is hidden now, it becomes private to the class, and if I want to access that particular variable, I have to access it via a member method. Only then I'll be able to access it. Now directly आप e.a करके access कर सकते हो, e.c करके आप access नहीं कर पाओ. You can hide the variables from outside, and if you want to access them, you have to access them via a given method. This is how you need to be working, right? So that is how you will implement what is called as data abstraction. Data abstraction का मतलब होता है hiding the data partially. So this is what is data abstraction and encapsulation. Abstraction is hiding the data partially. Encapsulation का मतलब होता है grouping of data and methods together. Now this is the program that I'm talking about. Now please, if you observe variable C, you'll not be able to access directly from outside. If you try to do that, it'll generate an error. But if you still want to access this variable C from outside, you will have to call a display method directly. If you try to access this, no, this will give you an error because this data is hidden. What you need to do here is, in this display method, if I call this display method like this from over here, sorry, if I call this display method from over here, then this display method in turn will call this variable C for me, and this should work fine. That is how this program will work. I leave you with this one, C. Now this is how you'll be working. Now if I try to write e.c, because C is now a private variable, it'll generate an error. So I can't write this anymore. So that is how you can hide whatever the data from outside. All those who studied other languages, जो private variables का जो concept था, that is what it is, right? 2 minutes, you can quickly type this, get the output, just play around with this variable C, and then you will see how exactly you can access it or how you can't access that. And then we move forward. Okay, now continuing with the data abstraction, just observe this. Now over here, what I've done is, यहाँ पर हमने ये देखा था कि how can we hide a variable from being accessible from outside. Now what I've done here is, I've written a display method, which is a normal method. And now look at this, I've written another method called display, and like variable C, इसके पहले भी double underscore डाला है. So what I want is, I don't want this display one method to be accessible from outside. उसके अंदर एक simple सा print statement लिखा हुआ है, that's okay. Now observe what I've done over here. I'm trying to access e.a and e.display. Similarly, I'll now try to access e.underscore display one. This one. Let me see what happens over here. Now again, when I try to run this, see, this generates an error. वो बोलता है display one नाम का method ही नहीं है. तो सीधा सीधा ये है, whenever you are defining a class, be it a variable or be it a method, if you put double underscore at the beginning of it, it is hidden from outside. Now the argument that remains is, then if at all I'm writing a method which is hidden like this, then how do I access it? See, always remember, any member which is private or which is hidden from outside can still be accessed via another member of the same class. Now what do you mean by that? Display and display one both belong to the same class data. So if I want, I can access display one method from this class called display, from this method called display. कैसे मालूम? Look at this. This is self dot. Now if I access this, now this should work. So what I've done is, there is a normal display method which is now calling this hidden display one method. अब बाहर से what I'm going to do is, I'm going to call just the normal display method. My understanding of this is, if I call this normal display method, this code will get executed, जिसमें से I'll call this display one method also, and then I should be able to get the desired output. Now when I run this program, if you see, ये तो e.a लिखा था print में, इसलिए आया. If you see these two statements, a is equal to 12 and c is equal to 8, this is because of this code within your display method. And finally, if you see this inside display one, what has happened? ये जो statement था, self.display1, it invoked the hidden method, and then I can access this. तो सीधी सीधी बात ये है, if you want to hide any data, be it a method or be it a variable from outside access, all you need to do is, you need to put a double underscore at the beginning of it. And second, if you want to access any hidden data, you need to call a member function. उसी क्लास के किसी फंक्शन में से आप उसको एक्सेस कर सकते हो. जैसे यहां पर इफ यू सी, माय डिस्प्ले फंक्शन हिडन वेरिएबल सी को भी एक्सेस कर रहा है, हिडन मेथड डिस्प्ले वन को भी एक्सेस कर रहा है. सो द डेटा इज हिडन फ्रॉम आउटसाइड, नॉट फॉर द मेंबर फंक्शन. सो दिस इज हाउ यू कैन इंप्लीमेंट डेटा एब्स्ट्रैक्शन in object-oriented programming in Python. So what we've tried to do today is, we've just tried to understand how exactly do we go about writing object-oriented codes, what is a class, what is an object, how to write methods, how to invoke methods, difference between method and a function, and then data abstraction. How do we go about implementing data abstraction? Now, in the next section, we'll continue with object-oriented programming, and we'll continue with more features on object-oriented programming.